Hey guys, just wanted to jump on here really quick. I've had a lot of people reach out to me in terms of how they can support what I'm doing. I am doing this full time now, and if you'd like to contribute, if you like and value the work that I'm doing and like to contribute, on every single episode I have a title "Support My Work." Underneath it, there's a Venmo, Locals, Cash App, or if you prefer not to use one of those methods, you can mail a check or money order to PO Box 25383, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255 9998. So, again, thank you for all the support. Appreciate it and look forward to more conversations ahead. Martin, we spoke a few weeks ago, and you had said that the computer showed that this would be the last election, and I'll tell you, it's after how what I'm feeling right now. I didn't really understand it at that moment, but I'm starting to see it now. And if I could share with you my thoughts, and then you tell me what you think about it, because no matter what, Trump is not going to be able to come in. He's got 2 years, right? He's got the House and the Senate for 2 years. The likelihood of what the economic fallout will be in that time, I don't imagine it being in a better place, although some people have disagreed with me on that. But, what will people do? They'll turn to the other side, and they will have lost hope because all those promises that were made are not going to be delivered. And I see now why that could potentially be the last election.
Well, that's an interesting take. I mean, look, the computer makes forecasts. I stood up at our conference, World Economic Conference, there in November. I think it was the 10th, and I pulled off of the Wayback Machine, the computer forecast from 1999. And it projected a 2008 panic cycle 10 years in advance. This thing has impressed me. And some of these forecasts are not me personally. I mean, nobody's coming to me in the middle of the night and saying, this is what, I mean, I put out at least 2-3 years ago that 24 would be the probably the last election. 28 may not even take place. Mainly because I had also, you can go to our site. I just took, for example, the number of seats a party holds, both Senate and House combined. And when you look at it, any technician in a market will look at it and say the Democratic Party is collapsing. It may not exist after this. Its peak was 1937. Ever since, every high is lower and every low is lower. All right. I mean, that's a bear market, mainly because the Democrats won on this Marxist agenda in 1937. All right. Vote for us. We'll take it from him and we'll give it to you. All right. It won that time, but they haven't changed that agenda. And, and then they just went so progressive off the beaten path here. I mean, you had Janet Yellen saying, we're going after the rich. We're going to audit eBay sales at $600. I don't think Elon Musk is selling a used bike for $600 on eBay. I mean, she got beaten over the head with that. I mean, come on. You're not going after rich when you're doing this. It's to them. I mean, as you know, I've dealt with governments since the 1980s around the world. And I mean, I've been called in from China, Europe, you name it, I've been there. I don't see any difference between politicians, no matter what country you want to talk about. are pretty much all the same. And so the Democrats are, in all honesty, I got a call about 2 weeks before the election because they were telling everybody they were going to sweep both houses and the White House. Um, and I was getting calls from Washington saying, "You sure your computer says the exact opposite?" I said, "Listen, I'm telling you, it doesn't change its mind. It put out this forecast sometime well in advance because when you look at it, people vote based upon the economy. Simple as that. You take Herbert Hoover. I mean, he didn't cause the Great Depression. He just got elected at the wrong time. All right. And he was thrown out. That's it. Who's ever in power is demonized. They were calling Hoovervilles, Brexit. The same thing happened there. The computer came out and said it was going to win. And every newspaper there said, no, it will lose. And what's happening in mainstream media, and you can see it in the polls, they present the polls the way they want you to vote. It's no longer honest. In Britain, every newspaper came out and said Brexit would lose. Nigel Farage came to our 2019 conference and says, of course I'm here. He's the only one that said I would win. 2016, same thing. Hillary spent up to 40 times more money than Trump. Computer said Trump would win. Every newspaper, Newsweek even had her picture, Madam President, on the front. I've got a couple of those. If you took a poll and just called people in Washington, D.C., I'm sure Trump might have difficulty getting 5%. Polls are very easily pushed one way or another. So the computer doesn't call up a whole bunch of people. It's not looking at that. It's just looking at the economics. And sure enough, everybody always goes basically for the bottom line. And look, when you look at it objectively here, about 40% of the population will always vote Democrat and the other 40% Republican. So the people that really decide is at best 20%. So if you look at, just look at the elections. Only 3 presidents ever hit 60%. That was FDR one time, LBJ after Kennedy was assassinated, and Richard Nixon when he said he was going to take us out of Vietnam. All right. Other than that, look at, I think Obama won by 51.5. That's it. They act like, they got a mandate. They're not mandates. They win, very rarely does somebody even reach 75%. Or 55%. This is just the way it is. There's maybe 10 to 20% max of the population that actually vote according to issues. The rest of them doesn't matter who they put up as a candidate. They'll vote for, a monkey if it's got the party label on it. That's basically it. So the Democrats are in serious trouble, and you see them infighting right now. It's your fault. They went completely off the beaten path, with the woke agenda. Companies that were going woke, as they said, go woke, you go broke. I don't want to be told my mother, calling her a mother offends somebody if she's a birthing machine or something. Come on. There's plenty of transgenders in Thailand where we also have an office. And there's, it's probably the sex change capital of the world. They're all over the place. All right. But they don't call themselves a woman. They call themselves ladyboys. They don't say everybody has to change the entire world because I'm offended by what you call somebody else. I mean, that's absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Yeah, that's the positive with this. One of the positives is one of the benefits is I think the DEI, the LGBTQ plus. I don't know if Pride Month. I'm sure locally Pride Month will still be maybe national, but most of that is in a bear market right now. But are you concerned as we come up to certification and inauguration, especially what's happening both in the Middle East and more so with Russia, Ukraine?
Well, yes. I mean, I also warned before. I mean, that I said, look, the computer says Trump will win. Personally, I know these neocons. I've had dinner with some of them. All right. You look in their eyes and you do not see a warm light at all. All you see is dark coldness, really.
What do you feel, Martin? Let me interrupt you. What do you feel when you've eaten dinner with somebody like this? What is the sense of them like? I mean, is there? And I've never met anybody like that, so I'm just curious. Like, is it they shake your hand, or is it this like? I mean, personality wise, what do you notice? Is it fake kindness or
no?
Snake oil salesman?
Look, many of from both sides of the aisle and in the middle. All right, they come to us because of the computer. I will meet with anybody, including Karl Marx if he was around. One thing my father taught me: it's not what you think; it's what your opponent thinks, and that they were you have to understand their thinking process to see what they're going to do. That's why I said, look, the computer says Trump will win. I think they're going to try and assassinate him. That was my personal opinion because I've met these people. They're into regime change. I argued with Bill Kristol years ago. It was, the view was if we remove Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi, we'll bring peace to the Middle East. So you're out of your minds. They think, if we bring democracy, then that will create peace. Democracy isn't what you even say it is. You don't care what the people vote for as long as you have power. That's it. Just look at, you had Republicans for Camilla. Who were they? Dick Cheney, all the neocons. Why? Because Camilla is the same thing as Biden. All right? She does what she's told. They don't want a president who is going to stand their own. And I disagree with Hillary's agenda, but she would have made a better president than Camilla. She's going to say, no, you're going to do this. Whereas Camilla goes, oh, okay, whatever. So leading into January 20th, I warned about the computer shows panic cycles in January, that these neocons, look, they got so close to grabbing that brass ring. All right. Trump coming in is a threat to their very existence. All right. Mainstream media was, of course, very, anti-Trump before. Oh, look at this. He's firing somebody else. He's unstable, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm sorry. What happened is very significant. As you know, I used to be part of the vetting process for somebody who wanted to be president. They would send me in. I would explain how the world economy works. But it was really a vetting process that I get back. They said, "What do you think? Can he handle it?" It was always if somebody was smart enough. And then in '99, I was asked to go meet with Bush Jr. And I was told, "Oh, this one's different." I said, "What's different?" He said, "No, he's really stupid." I said, "What?" They picked the cabinet. They picked Dick Cheney. They picked the whole thing. I was asked to be chief economic advisor in the White House. I declined. All right. Uh, Basically, Bush was like another Camilla. I feel bad for him that he's going to, go down in history as the guy with the Iraq War, but it was Dick Cheney. And so what you're looking at here is um, they are scared to death of Trump. John Bolton wanted to start World War III because Iran shot down an unmanned drone. I mean, this is the way they are. I don't know. Maybe from the 50s when we all had to hide underneath our desks, so Russia's going to send a nuke or something like that. I remember my father like saying, "Oh, I guess we're supposed to build a shelter in our basement." I mean, this was the 50s. They were like, we were going to be nuked. Maybe they were just psychologically damaged by all that. Khrushchev coming out, "We will bury you." Well, the Russians overthrew Khrushchev because he was crazy. And that was just communism. To them, that was an economic religion to spread it to the world. So these guys got their back up and said, well, we're going to spread democracy to the world. Well, communism fell, but they have not stopped. When Gorbachev came to power, Reagan, I was down there then, Reagan wanted to go meet with them. They said they couldn't say Gorbachev is a communist anymore. So they said, well, you can never trust a Russian. So their hatred of Russia from the communist days never changed. So what we're looking at is a serious threat to World War III. Fortunately, Putin understands this. I mean, I've got the declassified documents from the Clinton administration. Even Bill Clinton, when he met him, he says he's a very smart man. He knows what's going on. All right. He's been sitting on his hands because he doesn't want to take the bait. All right. Look, Zelensky is just our Hezbollah. He does whatever he's told. Look up, you'll see when he ran for office, he was promising peace, and he's done exactly the opposite. All right. I mean, basically, it wasn't working with the Donbass. The Donbass, that's where Russians have been for hundreds of years. He outlawed their religion, outlawed their language. You can't do this kind of stuff. I mean, that'd be like the United States outlawing you can no longer speak Spanish, or Canada saying you can't speak French. I think you're going to have a civil war, or you're going to change your religion to our religion, whatever it is. So most people don't realize, but Khrushchev is the one that rebuilt Kiev after World War II. Brezhnev, his successor, came from the Donbass. So this is an area that Russians have been there for hundreds of years. All right. It was Khrushchev that just drew the border for administrative purposes to Kiev. It was never a sovereign nation. It wasn't their area. They've just used this as an excuse to poke the bear. So when that wasn't working, they told Zelensky to invade Russia itself. Figuring, okay, fine, that will force Putin to attack. He has not attacked anything in NATO. So in the one breath they say, oh, well, he's afraid to go to war with NATO. And the other breath they go, oh, well, he wants to conquer all of Europe. I mean, he's been there since late 99. If he wanted to conquer Europe, he would have done it a long time ago. But the Russian people don't want to do that any more than the American people want to go, or the Europeans, or even the Chinese. Wars are created by governments, by the elite, not by the average person. We all just want to get along with life, take care of our families, and go watch the latest movie or whatever. What does a soldier get out of war? Nothing. The best he can hope for is to come home in one piece. That's it. All right? Oh, he did a good job. Here's a medal. You get nothing out of it. Look at the 1930s. One of the things that brought down basically Hoover, it was called the bonus army. All the veterans from World War I were never paid what they were supposed to have been paid. They marched on Washington, and the military sent in tanks against civilians on the streets. All right. That's why they had to create the GI Bill when World War II came. All right, we'll create a bill. We're not going to default on you as we did on World War I. They never honor their obligations. So I'm afraid what you're looking at is these guys, excuse me, these guys are trying to create World War III to trap basically Trump into it. NATO is just a retirement home for neocons. And what they want to do is get anything, and I'm concerned that they would create a false flag and claim that Russia did it. Just to invoke Article 5 and then say, see, you have to now send troops to Europe. I mean, this is what they want. You can look at, I put on my site, 2 clips of Lindsey Graham. One, he said, this is the best money we ever spent killing Russians. I mean, if you said that on the street against anybody else, it's called a hate crime. I think in some countries you'd be in prison for 20 years for that. And in Britain, they just gave a guy 20 months in prison because he said he's sick and tired of his taxes going to illegal aliens who rape our kids. They gave him 20 months for saying that. So, look, these people are desperate. They want to invoke Article 5 to trap Trump into a war. And like I said, they've spent their entire lives dreaming about taking over Russia. The other clip with Lindsey Graham, I put on our site, basically comes from Face the Nation. Suddenly, he's told the truth for once. He said, there's $10 to $12 trillion in natural resources under Crimea. It's a gas field. We can't allow Russia and China to have that. So this isn't really about democracy and freedom and all the rest of the stuff. We're back to just energy like you were doing in Iraq. So it's just, I think that they're definitely going to try and start, they're trying desperately to create World War III ahead of time. And from what I've been told, they're planning on major protests in Washington, D.C. for January 20th. They want to get it so bad that he's forced to call out the National Guard so they can say, see, he's a dictator.
So I'm looking at your X handle right now, and you posted this morning, a couple hours ago, saying this is the first time the neocons have blinked. Zelensky has not fired any more long-range missiles as they access the crisis until today. Nevertheless, what is being bantered around is that Putin does not have a lot of these missiles. Now, do you think that the British or someone else in NATO will potentially try to escalate this by baiting Russia if the United States won't provide the necessary equipment to Ukraine?
Oh, yeah. Stammer, that's why there's a a petition to call for a re-election in Britain right now. Stammer has said we will send in troops if Trump tries to get out of Ukraine. Fine, he's got an army of 60,000. What are they going to do? Yeah, I mean, these people want war. I spoke to 3 European governments. In all honesty, I told them, I said, back in World War II, Hitler didn't bomb Paris because he thought it was a beautiful city. He didn't bomb the monuments. You still had the Colosseum, etc. I said, this time they come after your ass here in Rome, everything's gone. I don't think they appreciate what has actually taken place. But this weapon that he launched was, I can tell you, it did scare the hell out of a lot of people in the military. They understood what it was.
What did you think of it, Martin?
It is a non-nuclear weapon that has the similar impact. It absolutely pulverized that plant, and it went down for 6 floors. So so the excuse they're now saying, oh, well, it was experimental. He doesn't have that many of them. Fine, I got 3 of them. Let's see, there goes Brussels, Frankfurt, and London. And they can't be stopped. They're hypersonic and they vary speed. You can't target it. This is what, real live sources have told me, holy shit, this thing is really, Putin did it because he does not want World War III. My concern is that Russia has their neocons the same as we do. And so does China. All right. You remove Putin and the hardliners are coming back and they're going to want the same thing that our guys want. Let's get it on. That's my concern. As you know, back in 1999, I ended up in the middle of this plot to take over Russia back then. And I published a book on it, got all the declassified documents from the Clinton administration. I was asked to put in $10 billion to fund this Hermitage capital. They were taking over, they wanted to take over Russia. And they blackmailed Yeltsin with a $7 billion wire they got him to do to Geneva, and they immediately went to the DOJ and said, oh, that's a money laundering thing, and DOJ went in and charged Bank of New York. All right? And then they told Yeltsin, you step down or all this is going to come out. At the same time, the hardliners filed an impeachment motion against him. So he was getting it from both sides. From the American side, the bankers were putting forth Boris Berezovsky. I mean, he even called me. I mean, when I didn't want to put in $10 billion. It was for regime change. Oh, I was told if I put in $10 billion, I'll get $100 billion back. Very nice. What am I going to do with it? Not interested in regime change. This is what it was all about. And when Yeltsin realized that he was caught between both sides, that's how Putin came in. He turned to Putin, who was not a communist and he was not an oligarch. That's why he was so popular. And over 70% people were cheering because they did not want to go back to communism. And they were sick and tired of the oligarchs. So that's how Putin got in. And that's why the neocons have hated Putin, because he stopped their agenda back then. And I can tell you the last words of Yeltsin to Putin when he left. He says, protect Russia. He was getting it from both sides. We have to understand one thing. Russia is the richest country in the world from a natural resource perspective. That's why Hitler wanted it, Napoleon wanted it. Everybody's wanted to get their hands on it. I can even tell you, maybe they'll make a movie about it one day. But in 1917, Russia had the largest gold reserves of any country on the planet. All right. Because of the revolution coming, somebody hid the gold reserves. Nobody knows what happened to them. Some argued it was buried in a forest. Others, they was dropped it to one of the deepest, lakes in the country. Nobody's been able to find it yet. And whoever was around to decide where to put it is obviously dead. So it'd be like, looking for the Knights Templars, treasure or something, I guess.
Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy.
Yeah. But it was, you're talking about the largest gold reserves of any country on earth. It was a lot of gold.
Does the legend have it that it was? I mean, is that it was moved somewhere and nobody knows where? Because people are looking for it and they've never been able to find it.
Never been able to find it. A number of people have tried. Like I say, all I can tell you is what the rumors are. One was it was buried in a forest, or the other one it was dropped. They do have some very deep lakes, and they thought it was dropped in one of the lakes. I think I forget which name. That's like 1,000 feet or something deep. So nobody's been able to find it yet, but there have been several people on this quest to try and find it.
Do you think so? Do you see? You mentioned not necessarily a peaceful transition, but do you see the transition occurring? I mean, do you see Trump taking office?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know how they could stop. I mean, if war I didn't mean to cut you off, but if war kicked off, let's say today, and it escalated and Putin responded, is there a scenario where they could suspend the transfer?
They could. It's I've investigated that under martial law. There's only one instance of martial law being declared in the United States, and that was Hawaii went after Pearl Harbor.
Didn't Lincoln do it too, Martin? Didn't Lincoln do that during the Civil War?
Yes, but I mean not entirely. He suspended the habeas corpus, but the decisions in the Supreme Court on it basically say that it is legitimate, but the criteria is if the courts are closed. So you have to understand, federal courts are not constitutional. The Constitution only created the Supreme Court. All the other federal courts are created by Congress. Congress can suspend them, can disperse them. It's not unconstitutional to do so. So can Congress shut it down? Yes, but right now it's, you got the House still in the control of Republicans, so it's unlikely that they would actually try to pull that off. And I think you're going to end up with massive civil unrest. I mean, we're headed in that direction anyhow. I mean, eventually the country will probably break apart. But I mean, the same thing as Canada will go east-west. U.S. will probably move into at least 3 regions: Northeast, West Coast, maybe the Bible Belt with the South, or 4 with the Bible Belt and then the South. But you have to understand, throughout history, this idea of centralized government always fails. It has never worked once. When Camilla, somebody talked to her about, she was at a rally and said, question, I think it was abortion. and rage religion. She says, you're at the wrong rally. That's why the Democrats are failing. They think they get in and it's our turn to punish the other side. That's not what civilization's about. It's not going to survive that way. Right? The model to look at is Rome. Yes, Rome lasted 1,000 years, but didn't get involved in altering your culture or anything of that nature. The Romans really didn't have hundreds of gods. What it was that they conquered countries, and basically they excuse me.
Bless you.
They allowed them to keep their own gods and culture. They didn't change it. This is what's wrong with Europe and with Washington. They're going to do it our way. It doesn't work that way. Even Lenin, his original idea for Russia was based upon the United States, a confederation, that the states would retain their sovereignty. He even wrote a letter, said, do not allow Stalin to succeed me. Stalin did. And the rumor is that he basically poisoned Lenin and his wife because he wanted the power. He seized the power and he did decentralized control. Everybody's got to do what I tell them. That's why communism failed. So any form of centralized government like this that becomes dictatorial, it has historically never, ever survived. So that's, unfortunately, our politics has gone down that path. It's now our turn, so we're going to do what we want. What about the other half of the country that's, the opposite side? That not only creates hostility, civil unrest, etc., and that's why countries break apart.
Do you excuse me? Do you so you expect Trump to take office in January? Because the Supreme Court would never, you don't think they would hold up if there was an attempt for martial law, the Supreme Court would more than likely shoot it down.
Yes, and I don't think they could get it in without congressional approval, which would require both houses. McConnell in the Senate, he'd sell his mother for 10 cents, basically, I think.
And she's not even alive anymore.
Probably, given his age. But, they are the swamp creatures. He's opposed Trump on every which way from Sunday because this is our town. You're not going to tell us how it works. Look, I've been there and I've told people I could run for Congress. I can say whatever you want me to say. I'll save the whales. I'll make it not rain on Thursdays or weekends or whatever. And cheer. Yeah, I really like what he says. Then I get there. There's a meeting the first day. And what happens? Congratulations. Glad you're here. Now here is how it works. All right. Just look at all the votes. They're down party line. You're told how to vote. So it doesn't really matter what one of these people say. The decisions are made in the back room.
I want to ask you, about Trump's cabinet picks, and one of the things I'm curious on is his Treasury Secretary. What are your thoughts on him?
What happened with Trump the first time? He was naive. I think you can even watch the documentary from General Flynn. He said the same thing. Trump didn't know what he was doing when he first went in. He listened to them. Oh, we need good qualified people with experience. Otherwise, you have no experience with government. And to give confidence to the world, we need these people in. He listened. They stuffed his cabinet. So like John Bolton and the rest of them. Then he starts realizing they were all stabbing him in the back. So he started firing these people. Like I said, I was part of the vetting process. They picked that. They picked Dick Cheney, not Bush. Um, as I said, I was even asked to be chief economic advisor, so I know what goes on. I've been there in the front line. All right, and uh, that's why Trump is making his cabinet picks now, before he even gets to Washington. All right, that's a signal. Basically, screw you. You're not going to control this administration like you did the last time. And so you have the mainstream media. Oh, these people have no experience. Exactly. That's what you need. You need somebody who's not going to be part of the swamp, going to look at it objectively and say, hey, wait a minute, what are you spending this money on? What I disagree with Trump on is, and I've sent basically emails to the Trump side and to the RFK side. And I'll tell you what it is. There's somebody who has some knowledge of government and history and funding. And they said, all right, fine. Before the income tax, the country was funded by tariffs. So this is what they're telling him to do. What I just wrote and sent to them is that this is a brain dead decision, and you better listen just for once with somebody with experience rather than academic credentials. You will create a Great Depression if you do this. And I told them, I testified before the House Ways and Means Committee. I think it was back in '96. I was asked then, why did no American company get any of the contracts from China to build the Yellow River Dam? And I explained, we tax worldwide income. Germany did not. So a German company is already 25 to 35% cheaper than an American company can possibly be. And if you want to create something, this is the way you do it. All right. They left not because labor is too expensive. I reorganized Japanese companies, putting them into Europe. That's how I got to know Maggie Thatcher. All right. I was putting, if they need skilled labor, I was putting the car manufacturers in Britain. I was putting the airlines that needed the best tax deal in Ireland. I didn't put anybody in Germany. I didn't put anybody in France. And she heard there was this guy bringing companies to Britain. And I happen to have known her personal advisor, Sir Alan Walters. And he says, yeah, that's Marty. She says, you know him? He says, yes. I want to meet this guy. So Maggie was very smart. She said, why are you doing this? I said, well, if I have a company and they put the plant in Germany, the cost for social programs, taxes, etc., on labor is 40% higher than Britain. She says, really? I said, yes. I mean, I was even called into a major telecommunications company in Germany. I was in London. I got a phone call. They said, look, we need you here first thing in the morning. I said, what's up? You'll find out when you get here. So I go to this board meeting. I am then appointed advisor to the pension fund. No proposal or anything. And then they end up resigning. I said, what is this, a Harry Carey meeting or something? What's going on here? And then they explained they had to petition the government to reduce their workforce by 20%. Government finally agreed they could do that. Then last minute, the government came back and says it's not fair that you pick who you want to dismiss. You have to make the offer. I think it was 150,000 to give up your job. So you have to make it to everybody to be fair. So what happened? The people that knew they could get a job right away, they took the 150 and left, including the board members. All right. And the chairman said, look, I'm resigning because I don't want my name associated with this because this company's going to go down, and then I'll be blamed, because what happened, and the same thing happened in Greece. And I even spoke to an IMF board member about this. All right. You make it an offer like that, 150,000 to give up your job. The people that knew they could get a job immediately took the 150 and ran. The people that could not are the ones that stayed. So the very people they wanted to get rid of, all right, they were stuck with. And the qualified people left. Same thing happened in Greece. Human nature is human nature. And so I explained, look, Britain doesn't have these crazy socialistic laws like that. And it's very important to understand this. So if Trump's proposal will fail. Why? Because tariffs are not going to work. You're going to create a global depression, the same way as raising tariffs during the Great Depression did the same thing, protectionism. All right, you want to basically, the end goal is to protect American jobs, etc. And he's saying eliminate the income tax and we replace it with tariffs. Look, that's from the 19th century. The government was nowhere close to the size that it is today, with all the social programs and commitments. Tariffs worked back then. Today it's not. All right, you couldn't possibly collect enough in tariffs to fund the government. So basically, if you eliminated the income tax, we don't need it. It's a barbarous relic from the past. When money was coined, the king had to get some back to spend it again. All right, that's what taxes were for. Today we just print. Why are we borrowing dollars? We print, paying interest. We're paying over $1 trillion in interest payments this year. It's waste. Okay, then this has just gotten so out of hand. If you had just printed the money that we needed to cover the spending that year, we wouldn't have these interest expenditures. Inflation would be far less. All right. What you would pay for a mortgage is probably double what you would be paying under my proposal. Why? Because the government is the elephant in the room. It's out there bidding for money long term. And so what happens, you are competing with the government for a 30-year mortgage. You might default. So I get a premium on you versus, the government did AAA. All right. I mean, look, we're heading into a serious problem. Just look at the markets are screaming at you. All right, the Fed cut rates. Fine. What did the 10-year do? 10-year rate went up. Fed can only control the short term, not the long term. That's what quantitative easing was about. It bought in long-term debt to try and reduce the supply to bring down the interest rate on long term, because the Fed cannot set the long-term rates. Central banks can only set the immediate rate. That's it. All right. Everything else is driven by the market. So the Fed cut a half, then a cut again, and look at the 10-year bond. Interest rates went up, not down. Why? Because we know we're going into war. You're going into war, there's going to be a hell of a lot more of that debt coming from where it is right now. Interest rates go up during war.
So you see, as we come into 25, what is your economic outlook then for the first 6 months?
Well, the computer's basically showing that we're headed into a recession that's not going to bottom until 2028.
You think it's a recession, Martin, or do you think it'll be a depression?
A depression in certain areas, particularly outside the country, more so. Where
Like where?
Europe
Sorry.
Europe is the one that's the worst. Just look at the proposal that Stammered put in. The rich has now been redefined as anybody with a savings account. You know, they're trying to crush anybody that even talks to them in a different tone. Like I said, it was a guy that just, they're putting in children for criticizing the government in prison. I mean, this is insane. I mean, I won't go back to Britain anymore because largely they probably would put me in prison because I criticized them, 10 years ago. It's just nuts.
So you see a recession in the United States, but you don't see it hitting that. I look at all this and how could this not be worse than 2008? Because at some point, I mean, this whole financial system is it's fake.
Not really. What it is that when you look historically, all right, and this is what most people have gotten wrong. They just look at the amount of debt and say, oh, it's got to crash. That's not the issue. The debt could be $4 quadrillion. All right. The issue is when people lose confidence in the government. As long as you have people standing in line to buy government debt, it can keep rolling it, indefinitely. It's when you begin to undermine the confidence in government, and that's the problem. Now, the neocons, they're very myopic. All they want is war, and they don't give a second thought to the people or to the country. What this is about is that you're looking at it from a standpoint, you have, they put sanctions on Russia and said, all right, fine, we're going to take you out of SWIFT. All they did was send up a flare, and all these other countries said, wait a minute, if we don't do what they tell us to do, we're removed from SWIFT. They even threatened China. They have no clue about how the world economy even works. All right. The sanctions on Russia, what did it do? Push gasoline prices all the way up. We're all connected in this. But they don't know anything beyond guns and war. That's it. That's all they know. So you have Blinken threatening China. You help Russia, we'll put sanctions on you. So guess what? Okay, fine. China started selling off U.S. debt. They dumped $53 billion the first quarter this year. If they do not buy debt, guess what? Long-term rates are going to go up. All right, simple as that. That's why you see the rates in 10 years going higher, even though the Fed lowered rates. All right. The BRICS is basically geopolitical. They use this, they turned the dollar into a weapon and the SWIFT system into a weapon. They don't care about the economy. They don't care how it functions. They just have to defeat Russia. They're complete, they're traitors to our own country. So that's what BRICS is really about. It's not about gold and the dollar's not backed and all that nonsense. It's like, wait a minute. They removed Russia from the SWIFT system. They can do that to me. So India, all these countries are starting to wake up against this authoritarian rule that's coming out of Washington. Hopefully Trump will change that to some degree. But I can tell you, the computer is showing that his 4-year term is at best only going to last about 2. There's going to be a major change by 26. And it may not be for the better.
Meaning, what kind of change do you anticipate?
Geopolitical. I mean, this whole thing is just nuts. The computer's showing, as I've said many times, 2032 is the end game. Our form of government, republics, they should go, basically by the same direction as the old Edsel, the Ford Motor Company. Republics are the worst form of government, period, because they're representative governments. The best form of government we can possibly have is a direct democracy. And I've done a report on it. A lot of people, direct democracy is bad. No, that's all coming from Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates, but mainly because they saw it as demigods and people didn't know how to run a government. But we weren't talking about major things. They wanted the people to be involved. And just look at Switzerland. You have, they have basically referendums people have to vote on. We don't live in a democracy. This is all propaganda. Are we ever asked, gee, shall we go to war with Russia? They just do stuff. Vietnam. I mean, I lost, most of my high school friends. You're 18, too young to drink, too young to vote, but that's democracy. Here's a gun, go kill somebody. They had no right to vote. Oh, but that's democracy? That's not democracy. That's a dictatorship. And, this propaganda. Democracy is when the people vote directly. Representative republics, we hire somebody to go down and represent us. And when they get down there, hey, here's some money, vote our way. Look, the Constitution before the Civil War, these people were not there all the time. All right. They were paid per diem. That was it. All right. How did they become career politicians? It was the Civil War. They bribed them. Vote for us and we'll give you an annual salary. That's when annual salaries began. And then we ended up with this whole thing of career politicians. They don't know anything about anything. They have no personal experience. They pull in academics that have no experience whatsoever. And, look, Adam Smith, when he created the Wealth of Nations, he went out and investigated. All right. Karl Marx just started with a wonderful theory. Nobody, other than really Smith, the rest of them are all just regurgitating something. Keynes is really a regurgitation of Marxism. The government is powerful enough and can control it. This is why we have central banks coming to us. Keynesian economics is dead. It's finished. All right. In the 30s, when he came up with that idea, the U.S. had a balanced budget. Today, the U.S. is the biggest borrower in the room. You raise interest rates to stop uh, the inflation doesn't work. What happens? Does anybody in Congress say, "Oh, gee, the Fed wants us to spend less"? Never going to happen. So, I mean, the whole system has changed. This is what 2032 is about. It's coming to a collapse. And we're going to have to reform a new government. And hopefully, let's just learn once from history. Just once. I mean, every one of these times there's a crisis or whatever, somebody goes up, oh, we should do this. Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Does anybody ask, has this been attempted before? Did it work? Oh, I don't know. It's just idiots, idiot after idiot after idiot.
So basically, Trump's not going to come in and save us, Martin. It was what you're.
No.
And pardon my language, we're fucked. I mean, this isn't changing the outlook, right?
No, I mean, I am concerned about whoever is giving him this advice about, eliminating the income tax and doing the tariffs. Sounds nice, but it's not going to work. Eliminate the income tax, yes. Then what will happen? You will attract all the companies the left, because of taxation, will come home. All right. In addition to that, companies from around the world will move here. Their economies will have a recession and a depression. We will actually survive. Will they do it? I doubt it. Makes too much common sense.
Last question. Going back for a second, who is running the country right now in regards to making decisions with arming Ukraine, telling them, NATO to bomb in the interior? Because it's not Biden.
No, it's Blinken.
Jake Sullivan too?
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way. You got a statement from the State Department that said, we're going to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles. Biden didn't come out. How do we know he even made that decision? I mean, he's not competent. And Camilla's not competent. I mean, just look at what she did. She was at the Munich Security Conference. They handed her the cue card. Oh, Ukraine should join NATO. All right. 3 days later, Russia goes in. All right. You just wiped out basically 3 treaties. She's an idiot. She just says whatever she's told. She has no clue. You just wiped out all the various different, treaties. You had Angela Merkel. In all honesty, a friend of mine I just posted on our site. A friend of mine interviewed the Russian ambassador in Netherlands. And it's important whether you agree or you disagree. You have to listen to what the other side is saying, because they will respond based upon their perspective. Simple as that. All right. And it's the same thing with market crashes. All right. I got called in by the Brady Commission back in '87. And, the academic, we have to find that guy that, shorted this market and forced it down. I said, excuse me. Do you realize that every investigation since 1907 has begun with those words and nobody's ever been found? I said, don't you understand how markets work? Oh, I teach finance at, whichever it was. And I said, that's very nice. I have over $3 trillion under contract. I think I know what capital moves. All right. I said, a crash happens because everybody's long. The bulk of everybody's bought. You've gotten the last buyer some news comes out, you try to sell, and only a trader's ever experienced it. There's no bid. Then the Dow will go down 1,000 points real fast. It's not that somebody's coming in. There's never been some huge short position. That's absurd. It's that whenever you collect the vast majority on either side, the majority always has to be wrong because they are the fuel that makes it happen. Everybody's long. They panic. I mean, they investigated in the 87 crash. They called up the fund managers. Why did you sell? Basically, the overwhelming reason was they called the floor. What's going on? I don't know. That was the worst response possible. All right. Dow's down 1,000 points. All right, fine. You don't know why it went down? Maybe, the rumors start flying. Russia just invaded Europe and the communications are down, so we don't know yet. I mean, they got really wild. So they sold. And that's prudent. If you don't know what's going on, you get out. All right. If you read the Brady Commission report at the bottom, I got them to at least not do anything against the private sector. But at the end of the report, they said, well, we think foreign exchange had something to do with it. I warned them. I went to President Reagan. I said, you lowered the dollar after the G5 meeting formation at the Plaza Accord. You lowered the dollar by 40%. You just sold a third of the national debt to the Japanese. They're going to sell. Oh, why would they? Because they're going to lose money in Japanese yen. Don't you understand that? These people have no clue how the world economy works. Everybody responds based upon their own net view of the world. You take the dollar down 40% and all the foreigners are going to be selling. Just look at why the dollar goes up. During war, World War I, all the money came here. All right? Europe's blowing itself up. World War II, same thing. That's what made the dollar the reserve currency. 1896, we were broke. J.P. Morgan had to lend $100 million. So from 1896 to 1945, we became the largest economy in the world. All capital flows. All right. Europe thinks the third time is a charm where you can defeat Russia. Very nice. You're going to blow up everything. So effectively, what do you got? It's capital's coming here again.
So last question. You got time for one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of your other posts, you were talking about Bitcoin and the tremendous growth that it's been experiencing. Where do you see all that going?
Look, it's a trading vehicle. All right. It got started, if you dig a little bit, the bulk of the transactions were coming out of China. The Chinese government called in all the Bitcoin people. Why? Because they figured out, gee, I can buy Bitcoin here and I can sell it over there. They were using it to get money out of the country. All right. It was a money laundering scheme. And then the government finally figured it out and called in all the Bitcoin. You're looking at the same thing. All right. It's an it's an international commodity, like gold. So it's the same thing if it's traded in Europe or if it's traded in China or here. All right. So you're not talking about different quality or anything like that. It's not like Brent crude versus Texas crude. It's the same thing. And it's just basically digitized gold in a way that's the same commodity. So it lends itself to basically money laundering. And it's been doing well largely because a lot of Europeans have been using it to get money out of Europe the same way as the Chinese did to get it out of China. Eventually, the government will figure it out, but that's really what you're looking at. It's a trading vehicle. It's not a store of wealth. All right. If it's a store of wealth, it doesn't rise and fall. All right. You can lose 40% on it very quickly. All right. That's not a store of wealth. It's not going to replace the dollar as a reserve currency. That's another propaganda thing. A currency cannot be fixed. All right. That's what took Bretton Woods down. They fixed gold at $35, but you continue to print the amount of dollars. Eventually, the system's got to, I think a 3-year-old with a pocket calculator could figure out what's going to go bust. All right. The money supply must expand and contract with the economy. Otherwise, if you created, the problem that people got behind Bitcoin, it's, replacement of the dollar. You don't even understand the economy. And if you had $10 and 10 people, all right, we all can have one. If there's 20 people and still $10, what happens? Now we're down to 50 cents. It's deflationary, not inflationary. All right, you're creating the exact opposite. You're creating a global depression. Money has to be able to expand with the population and economic growth. That it's the politicians that it's their spending. It's the political system we have that's the problem. Vote for me, and I'll steal it from this guy and give it to you. That's what's wrong. All right. It's even in one of the, it's prohibited by one of the 10 Commandments.
It's a great line, Martin.
Yeah, and that's really what it is. This has been going on for thousands of years.
Vote for me.
It's out.
What is it? Vote for me, and I'll steal from him and give it to you.
Yeah, that's basically it.
That should be a shirt.
Probably, yes. But Assyria, Babylon, all of these, legal codes, they outlawed that. Hammurabi's code is wage and price controls, fixing how much you can charge interest. Obviously, there were economic problems, or you wouldn't come up with laws that dealt with it. This is human nature. It has not changed in 6,000 years.
Where can people find you, Martin?
ArmstrongEconomics.com. We keep it as a public service. You don't have to register. We don't sell swampland in Florida or anything else. No emails and say, hey, buy this or whatever. You don't have to put in an email. You just go to the site. That's fine.
As always, thank you for coming back on. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll follow things along. And I'm sure it won't be too far down the road where I'll be pinging you saying, Martin, I gotta you gotta tell me what's going on.
Well, as the Chinese curse said, may you live in interesting times.
Mic drop.